Okay, we're talking about what is the difference between an emotional reaction and emotions coming out or feelings coming out. So this is what we're inquiring about, right? Okay, emotions stop you going towards the feeling. They keep you on the surface. They
Mm,
energy, so you feel in some ways you feel at least I've released some energy. You don't consciously think that, but that's what happens.
yeah.
But it is cyclical and it's not going anywhere and there's no resolution and it's basically negative, right? Feeling is what's underneath the root of that upset, the real root of it. And it might be really upset, but it's a feeling and it has a very different sense to it. And it will take you deep. Emotions are up here on the surface and they might be loud and blah, 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 but emotion will take you deep into your heart. You might feel deeply sad, but you must know that feeling of you feel sad, but you feel your heart, you feel connected. Think of a time when you've watched something and you've been touched, film, or can you think of a moment or anything? Something said something to you, or
Yeah, mostly it happens in nature when I see
right.
beautiful nature or
So you're in nature and a feeling comes over you, right? Tell me about that.
yeah, then I feel totally at peace and nothing bothers me. I'm just
Hold that here. Now think about a time when your emotions are running wild and the things when you say, I think I need to learn to control, you're going round and round as you're highly excitable, the
mm,
way like that, you're feeling very emotional. Can you
yeah,
have you had that recently?
yeah, a lot.
Okay. So can you see the difference?
Oh yeah.
One is
It's very, very, very unpleasant to have these racing thoughts and emotions, and your whole body is tied up in knots, and it feels awful.
emotion is personality. Feeling isn't, but emotion is. So what you're really saying is that when I'm emotional, my personality is really at the front and it's running the show. And people can feel that and they'll pick it up. And you could be in a room with somebody who's really angry and they wouldn't say a word, but you would feel it. I mean, most people would. You'd be pretty dense if you didn't. So we give off these all sorts of subtle signals and resonances, and if you're coming from emotion, of course, and you are speaking, people can really pick it up quick. And I remember that session we had, and you were talking about your brother, and it was interesting because I could see you entering into that zone of personality, and maybe you became aware of it too. It was a bit like watching a picture slightly go out of focus very, very slowly. Actually, it's a Woody Allen film. I can't remember which one it is, where a character is played by Robin Williams, and it's a brilliant conceit because they use a cinematic technique that puts him out of focus, and it's emblematic of how he's feeling. Okay, so you're talking about your brother. It's fed by a lifetime of a history with him and of emotions about it. And as the emotions come in, the clarity of the watcher is kind of receding and the emotions take over and the emotions talk and the emotions have their agenda. And so, in a way, I think what I did was point out one of the main agendas, which is like, I've been hurt. It's unjust. He should say sorry. Everybody should feel sorry for me. I need to have justice, all those sort of things. Now, all of those sort of things might be fair enough. They might all be true. There has been injustice done, maybe you've been treated badly, blah, blah, blah. But that's not really what we're talking about here. So we're talking about what you do with that injustice, if that is indeed what it is. That's between you and him, right? So we're talking about shit happens, but what do you do with it? And if you are just a victim of it, which means being pulled into your personality and your emotions, you are a victim. You're lost, right? You see this body as a circuit. As soon as you're in an emotion, that circuit is getting squirted with this the hormones, and all sorts of things going around, and your reality changes. It affects your health, it affects all sorts of things. Well, you know, when someone's talking to you and they're in emotion, you feel like you've lost contact with them. They could actually be talking to anyone. They're not really communicating with you. They're just offloading what they've got to say. They could be talking to a wall, you know. So you could feel they've kind of gone off. The connection is gone. Anyway, I started to feel that day, and I'm sure other people in the group did. So none of this is condemnatory. It's just what happened, you know, what happens in these instances. It becomes a kind of tirade, a sort of just an expulsion of that energy. And it doesn't really go anywhere. There's no fulfillment in that because it's just energy being fired off, but it doesn't, it's circular. It doesn't have a resolution because the resolution is dependent on Matthew's brother getting it and saying he's sorry and putting it right. And what's the problem with that? Matthew's brother, if he's acting from personalities, he seems to be, is almost certainly not going to do that. You're in a setup where there's no resolution. So when anybody listening is just a bystander to a awful setup, and they just got to listen to this tirade of upsetness, really, and unhappiness. So it's an interesting thing in terms of counseling, because just letting someone let out emotions like that are circular, that aren't going anywhere, doesn't really help the person, and it doesn't help the person listening, that's for sure. But it's very different if someone is accessing feelings. Then they are being heard. The feeling is what's behind that emotional kind of tirade. There's emotion, and then there's this feeling at the root of it. So if you wound back time and you went to the start of this, when this began with your brother, there will be the very first time that he acted in a certain way and you felt hurt. That's what you need to access. Like I said, feeling emotion doesn't go anywhere. It's like being on a roundabout without an exit road. It just goes round and round. If you can touch the original feeling behind it, it's a very different thing. But touching that is kind of about you. You see, it's your end. If you imagine a cord between you and your brother, it's about your end. And your end of that relationship is what you can do something about. And his end, you can't make him change. There's one side feeling your end, and then there's the acceptance, and this is what you began with, that you can't change. If you're waiting for him to change, you're not going to get anywhere, and you're just in a loop of suffering. It's a very interesting, different path, this, because it's not about self-obsession. It's a very adult angle that one has to have in this. You know, if you think of being stuck in emotion like a child having a tantrum, that's a childish angle. I want an ice cream, give it to me. If you don't, I'm going to cry, you know. And it's kind of, you do get that sort of thing with the personality and emotion. Whereas the adult one steps back and says, he's acting like that. He always has. It makes me feel like this. What can I change about this? And if you can't change him or change the situation with him, if there's no possibility of that, there's a major part of this which is about a responsibility for your, you know, the whole thing is about how am I living? It's all part of who am I? It all comes back to you. Before any relationship, it's you. It's you getting straight with your life and your original relationship to life. And from that, you have relationships that have honor in them and honesty and power in some ways. You know, sometimes you will walk away from things and people might think that's not very nice, but if it's the right thing to do, you will do it and it will come from the right place. So these sort of situations, difficult, and they're big mirrors. But if you accept the challenge, I mean, what you said at the beginning seemed to me that you'd started to crack one side of this. There is this thing also that when you change, the situation can change. Sometimes I find that, you know, there's a difficult situation and I've just got to learn something from it. When I've learned, and you think, oh God, I've got to speak up, I've got to tell that person something. Well, sometimes I find when I've got the lesson I need to learn from it, and I'm willing to speak up or say what I've got to say, the situation changes. It's almost like if you do your side of it, there's a sort of energetic resonance. Something happens out there. Anyway, but the point is, it starts with you and your side of it. With the emotion, you're just leaking energy. What do you call it in Landmark, Matthew? A game,
a racket.
A racket. Just quickly explain what you mean by that. I think.
Okay, so a racket in Landmark is a persistent way of being that has a physical counterpart. And we used to say, I did the Landmark Forum or the Forum 30 years ago. We used to say it's a persistent way of being. It's a complaint that you don't take any actions to change. So, for example, I had a racket about my little brother. Permanent complaint, persistent complaint about my little brother. The feeling of injustice probably is, torso or here. It's a physical feeling that goes with attention. And it has a few different elements. As well as the physical component, it has a payoff and a cost. The payoffs are generally being right or righteous, making someone else wrong, and being a victim because you've been wronged. And most sort of rackets that people have will have those payoffs and those costs.
The thing is, it's very comfortable for you to do that because the personality wants you to do that. You know how to do it. It's a safe zone, but it's not a fulfillment. It's not a healing. It's just a sort of jerk off, It's not a resolution. So it's very comfortable, but this requires you to go into more the area that you've avoided by going into that comfortable area, which is seeing life as it is, and perhaps seeing that he's not going to change. And you've got to drop that hope of him changing. The point for me in that is that you have no intention to change. That's the real root of it, you see. That's why it continues. And what we're talking about is going beyond all that. And you're just unhooking from the whole game of that, the whole racket. And when you do that, you're outside of it. You actually, that racket takes a lot of energy. It's energy down the drain. As soon as you step outside of it, you gain more energy and more space, more psychic space, and more freedom in your life.